Breaking news: King Charles abruptly halted a live parliamentary session, and his message to Keir Starmer has sent Westminster into total chaos. The Prime Minister stood motionless, unable to answer, as nearly 200 MPs watched in stunned silence. Moments later, 3 cabinet ministers exited the chamber, and what unfolded in the next minute could threaten the survival of this government before the week ends. If you want to witness how this constitutional standoff erupts, subscribe now, because what follows is deeply unsettling. This is what triggered one of the most extraordinary royal moves in modern British history. At exactly 2:17 p.m., Starmer was briefing Parliament on his new housing proposal, routine remarks, familiar procedures, ministers half listening, the usual Westminster scene, when centuries of protocol were suddenly broken. The Sergeant-at-Arms entered carrying the ceremonial black rod, a sight every MP instantly understood. The monarch was formally summoning Parliament on the spot, even though proceedings were already underway. This never happens. Confusion rippled through the chamber as Starmer stopped mid-sentence, his expression draining of color. Within 90 seconds, the entire House of Commons was moving toward the House of Lords in pure disorder. What followed inside the Lords' chamber defied anything witnesses had ever seen. King Charles stood at the throne without ceremonial robes, dressed in a plain dark suit, no crown, no regalia, only a visibly drained and weary figure. As the Lord Speaker attempted to open formal proceedings, the king lifted his hand and calmly stopped him, saying protocol would not be needed. His words cut sharply. He had observed this government, his government, steering Britain toward danger, remaining silent as tradition required, but when the Prime Minister declared an intention to override long-standing parliamentary conventions dating back to 1688, silence would have meant complicity. The chamber exploded. Conservative MPs shouted, Labour benches sat stunned, and Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle struck his gavel again and again to no effect. Starmer, according to those present, stood motionless, color drained from his face, unable to react or speak as the monarch publicly accused him of constitutional recklessness before the full British establishment. Seconds later, cameras caught the fallout. Transport Secretary Louise Hay rose and exited, followed immediately by Home Secretary Yvette Cooper. Then Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson rose and left, making 3 cabinet exits in under 2 minutes, and the impact was brutal. But what the public didn't yet know was what the king said next. After the ministers departed, he continued, his voice steadier and more forceful, revealing he had received more than 14,000 letters in the past month from ordinary British citizens alarmed by the government's direction. These were not activists, he stressed, but grandmothers in Cornwall, factory workers in Birmingham, teachers in Edinburgh, all fearful that the nation they cherish is being dismantled piece by piece. Constitutional experts watching live immediately labeled the moment explosive. Professor Helena Wilkinson of Cambridge appeared on BBC News, visibly shaken, saying the monarch had just turned public sentiment into a weapon against the Prime Minister, calling it political confrontation rather than ceremonial neutrality. And the king was not finished. He reached into his jacket and produced a single sheet of paper, explaining it was a letter from a 94-year-old Second World War veteran, Albert Hughes of Cardiff, who had landed on the beaches of Normandy in 1944. He liberated camps, helped rebuild Europe, and last month was informed his council flat would be converted for asylum accommodation, giving him 6 weeks to leave. Gasps swept the chamber as Charles went on, his voice tightening, saying Mr. Hughes asked whether this was what he had fought for, and that he had no answer, only the certainty that a government treating its heroes with such disregard forfeits its right to lead. The silence was crushing, MPs on all sides stunned, even loyal Labour members visibly shaken. Outside Parliament, veterans from the Falklands, Iraq, and Afghanistan, men and women who served with honor, are now sleeping in cars and doorways. Just last week, 71-year-old Falklands veteran David Morrison was found under a bridge in Portsmouth, wearing his medals, saying through tears he wanted to be remembered as someone who once mattered, that he defended his country and now his country would not defend him. At the same time, Parliament approved billions more in foreign aid, funding luxury hotel housing for asylum seekers, translation services in dozens of languages, and legal support packages costing more than many British families earn in years. The contrast is so stark it has driven even lifelong Labour voters away, including 69-year-old Sheffield grandmother Margaret Bennett, who after voting Labour for 5 decades shared a tearful viral video saying she once believed in the party. She said she once believed the party cared about people like her. But ignoring veterans while offering lavish support to those who have contributed nothing was a line she could no longer cross, a decision that left her heartbroken but firm. Her video exploded to 1.8 million views in just 6 hours, with comments overflowing from working-class Britons who feel deserted by the very movement that claimed to speak for them. What deepened the outrage were leaked figures showing the Home Office spent £127 million last year on hotel housing for asylum seekers alone, roughly £348,000 every day, while the Royal British Legion reports more than 6,000 veterans are homeless nationwide. Government data also shows former service members wait an average of 14 months for NHS mental health care, while new arrivals receive immediate housing, treatment, and financial aid. Janet Williams, a 58-year-old nurse from Leeds whose father served 3 decades in the Royal Navy, told The Telegraph her father can't secure a hip replacement, yet public money funds luxury hotel stays for those who arrived weeks ago, asking where justice exists in that. Her comments were shared nearly 500,000 times, underscoring that this fury is not coming from the extremes, but from ordinary citizens who feel betrayed. It's coming from ordinary British families who feel alienated in their own country, and the polls confirm the scale of the disaster. A rapid survey taken just 2 hours after the King's intervention showed Labour support plunging from 38% to 24% in a single afternoon, with traditional strongholds like Manchester, Liverpool, and Birmingham suffering even sharper declines, some registering drops of 20 points. This wasn't a statistical glitch but a political shock unfolding live. Then came an even more extraordinary moment no one anticipated. After the cabinet walkouts, King Charles crossed a line no monarch has approached in modern times by naming a government policy directly. The Levelling Down Britain Act, he said with unmistakable disapproval, was among the most deceptive pieces of legislation he had encountered, claiming to empower communities while stripping their authority, promising growth while locking independence, and rushed through Parliament so quickly it appeared designed to avoid scrutiny. Palace sources later revealed the King had spent 3 weeks examining the bill in detail, consulting constitutional experts from Oxford and Cambridge line by line. He held private meetings with former prime ministers from both sides, including Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and Theresa May, all of whom warned that Starmer's bill would fundamentally disrupt the balance between Westminster and the Crown. Sources say the King was enraged but restrained himself until Starmer announced plans to rush the legislation through the Lords using emergency procedures, at which point Charles decided enough was enough. At 7:30 p.m. the previous night, he summoned his private secretary and dictated the address he would deliver to Parliament. For 2 hours, aides urged him to reconsider, warning it would shatter his relationship with the government, but Charles reportedly met their pleas with a cold resolve, saying he would not stand by as the country slid into constitutional turmoil while he played a ceremonial role. What unfolded in the 48 hours leading up to the intervention exposes the depth of the crisis, with palace sources confirming that on Sunday evening the King also held a confidential meeting with Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby. The meeting stretched nearly 4 hours, and while its official details remain sealed, a palace aide later disclosed that the Archbishop warned Charles he was risking everything, saying he might save the country but destroy the crown, to which the King replied, without hesitation, that the crown is meaningless if it cannot protect the people it serves. Those words are now legendary inside palace walls, exposing a monarch who knows constitutional authority survives through principle, not force, and by that measure, Starmer's government had already forfeited its standing. The damage only deepened as reports emerged that while Charles prepared his intervention, Starmer was privately ridiculing him, with leaked audio from a closed Labour fundraiser capturing the Prime Minister dismissing the King as irrelevant and mocking the crown as a relic, drawing laughter from donors. When that recording surfaced at 6 p.m., just 3 hours after the royal address, social media erupted instantly, sending the hashtag accusing Starmer of insulting the King to the top within minutes, with even committed Republicans recoiling at the contempt. The timing could not have been more disastrous. It proved Charles right, and the fallout was immediate and ruthless. Within 30 minutes of the King's address, the pound slid more than 3% against the dollar, and £4.7 billion was erased from the FTSE 100 in a single session. Global investors may ignore palace drama, But they react instantly to instability, and stability vanished. Traders in Hong Kong, Singapore, and New York began aggressively shorting the pound at levels unseen since the Liz Truss budget collapse. By 4:15 p.m. London time, Goldman Sachs warned clients that UK political risk now resembled that of emerging markets and advised defensive positioning, while Deutsche Bank went further, urging a 30% reduction in UK exposure. The consequences are severe: borrowing costs are rising, mortgages will get more expensive, small businesses will face higher loan rates, and the government itself will pay more to service its debt. Chancellor Rachel Reeves watched £4.7 billion vanish in real time, fully aware that billions more could disappear in the coming days. The Conservative Party, sensing weakness, immediately tabled a vote of no confidence. Rishi Sunak, long quiet, delivered a blistering speech. When the King of England feels compelled to intervene because Parliament has lost its way, that's not a constitutional crisis, it's a failure of leadership. Tory MPs erupted into a standing ovation while Labour benches remained frozen in stunned silence. Social media exploded like never before, with hashtag King Charles Speaks hitting #1 globally within 40 minutes and trending in 73 countries. British Twitter became a battlefield, monarchists cheering, Republicans criticizing, but the most striking development was the wave of traditional Labour voters siding with the King. A user, Working Class Nan, a lifelong socialist, tweeted, "Never thought I'd say this, but the King just showed more backbone than our entire government. Maybe we've been backing the wrong horse." That tweet alone racked up 340,000 likes, while TikTok videos defending Charles went viral by the hundreds. A 22-year-old university student from Manchester posted a tearful video explaining why she was abandoning Labour. "I thought I was progressive," she said. "But watching the King defend our values while Starmer tears them down, I was wrong about everything." Her video hit 2.7 million views in just 5 hours, with thousands of young people in the comments sharing the same awakening. In a single afternoon, the Labour Party lost an entire generation. The international response was equally striking. The Canadian Prime Minister voiced support for constitutional monarchy and parliamentary traditions, a clear rebuke to Starmer. In Australia, opposition leaders called for renewed respect for Westminster procedures. Even French President Emmanuel Macron, no friend to monarchy, praised the importance of institutional stability. The most damaging reaction came from the United States. At 11:30 a.m. Washington time, the White House issued a carefully worded statement. The U.S. values its special relationship with the UK and hopes for a swift resolution to current political uncertainty, a diplomatic euphemism for disaster. American investors immediately began withdrawing funds from UK markets. Britain was no longer facing just a domestic crisis, the world was watching the country unravel on the global stage. Inside number 10, witnesses report utter chaos. Starmer called an emergency cabinet meeting for 4 p.m., but only 11 of 22 ministers attended. The rest either resigned, refused, or cited scheduling conflicts, disappearing as the government faltered. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner was absent, officially due to a family emergency, but sources confirmed she was meeting with backbench MPs, testing support for a leadership challenge. One Labour MP described the scene as a coup in slow motion. Rayner allegedly told them that Starmer was finished and the only question was whether they would sync with him or act quickly to save the party, words that sounded less like loyalty and more like a challenge in motion. Chancellor Rachel Reeves did attend the cabinet meeting but spent the entire time glued to her phone, and when Starmer demanded her focus, she reportedly looked up and replied flatly that she was handling the economic crisis he had created, plunging the room into silence. One minister later said that was the instant everyone knew Starmer had completely lost control, as even his closest allies began to turn. In Westminster corridors, junior ministers were overheard openly discussing succession scenarios, while WhatsApp groups with names like Real Labour and Future Forward were actively organizing his removal. The messages were merciless, with one MP bluntly declaring that he was finished, the King had broken him, and the party needed to move fast before being dragged down with him. Another message read simply, Rayner or Reeves, while a third added, anyone but Starmer. But it gets even more striking. Leaked screenshots from these WhatsApp groups show that some Labour MPs aren't just plotting to replace Starmer, they're talking about forming an entirely new party. One post stated, Labour is dead. The brand is toxic. We need a fresh start, new name, new leadership, new values. Another suggested, call it the British Workers' Party. Target Reform UK voters. What began as a leadership challenge has escalated into a potential party split that could reshape British politics forever. Veteran Labour MP Barry Gardiner told Sky News bluntly that in his 30 years in Parliament, he had never seen a Prime Minister lose control this quickly. The King didn't just attack policy, he called into question Starmer's judgment, integrity, and fitness to govern, a career-ending blow. Sources describe Starmer as broken, pacing number 10 like a caged animal, snapping at aides, refusing calls, and, according to one-time source, unrecognizable, paranoid, convinced that everyone was plotting against him. Another source said Starmer is lost in conspiracy theories, blaming the palace, the media, everyone but himself. The man who once promised stability and competence now seems completely out of his depth. But the real bombshell could topple the government entirely. Leaked documents obtained by The Telegraph show Starmer's team knew for 3 weeks that the King opposed the Levelling Down Britain Act. Palace officials issued repeated warnings, formal letters, private meetings, even a personal message from Charles himself, but the government ignored every one. If these documents are authentic, as multiple sources confirm, Starmer didn't just miscalculate, he deliberately provoked this crisis. Consider what that means. The Prime Minister received direct warnings that the legislation crossed constitutional red lines, yet pressed ahead, betting Charles wouldn't intervene publicly. That gamble just destroyed his government. The optics are catastrophic. Starmer disrespected the Crown, disrespected Parliament, and disregarded the constitutional framework that holds Britain together. He thought he could bulldoze his way through, and now he's paying the price. One leaked message from a senior Downing Street aide read, PM believes King is bluffing. Push through before he can react, sent just 48 hours before today's intervention. They knew the risk, gambled anyway, and lost. But there's another layer that makes this even more damning. The same leaked documents reveal Starmer's advisors conducted private polling 3 weeks ago, asking whether voters would side with the government if the King publicly opposed them. The results were brutal. 67% said they would back the King, only 18% the government. Starmer saw those numbers and pressed on regardless, ignoring clear warnings that this was political suicide. The implications are staggering. He had concrete evidence that confronting the monarch would destroy his government, yet he acted out of sheer arrogance. Now he faces a vote of no confidence, cascading resignations, and polls showing his party in freefall. This is no longer incompetence, it is political suicide by choice.